The UDRcast is not affiliated and does not represent any 12-step fellowship. I, Bill Ward, the host of the UDRcast, will be sharing my experience and my journey of recovery. That does include, but is not limited to, the literature contained in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 Steps. Our guests will be sharing their own path to recovery and what has worked for them. The UDRcast encourages and supports all paths to recovery. Welcome everybody to the UDRcast. UDR stands for Uncover, Discover, and Recover. My name is Bill Ward, and I'm coming to you from the recovery capital of Canada, Calgary, Alberta. Here we are going to discuss everything recovery, different perspectives, different experiences, both with the people I know and with others from around the world. If you resonate with anything you've heard on this episode today, we ask that you share it with anyone who you think may benefit from it. If you have any questions or comments, please find us at billward.life and send us a message in the info section. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. If you are interested in more recovery content, you can find the buttons for the YouTube channel and other social media outlets on the homepage, and you will be redirected to those platforms. We can recover, one person, one family, one community at a time. Okay, welcome everybody. It's Bill Ward here in the Big Book capital of Canada, Calgary, Alberta. I'm here with a buddy of mine, Shayne B. Shayne and I met, I'm going to say probably about 4 years ago now, eh?
Approximately, yes.
Yeah, about 4 years ago. We just met in recovery, saw each other passing by, and, I've had the chance over the years to interact with Shayne and get to know him and, become friends. We worked together there a couple of years ago with a landscaping outfit, doing some construction work. And we've also stayed in pretty good contact, in regards to learning about ourselves through different aspects of phone calls and, challenges that we've encountered over the years. Also, we've partaken in ceremony together, and we love ceremony. What can I say, right? The more spirituality and the more creator-centered, God-centered we can be, we're all about that. So anyway, I'd like to introduce Shayne, and Shayne, tell us where you're from and whatever you want to say.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Shayne. I'm an alcoholic addict. I'm from Winnipeg, Manitoba. I'm 38 years old. Been high and drunk for about 25 years until I found recovery. Here I am, just trying to survive and stay alive and heal and do this deal that I'm learning to practically apply to my day-to-days.
And I might add that you're doing a great job at that as well, my friend. So Shayne, I'd like to kind of take us back in time. As you stated, you're from Winnipeg. It's a pretty rough town. There's a lot of shenanigans going on out in Winnipeg. You got to be pretty resilient and pretty tough, and you got to know your way around to navigate the life of Winnipeg. I'd like to just kind of go back and give us a kind of a scenario of how you were raised and what kind of challenges you had to deal with as a young man. Family, deaths, whatever kind of paints the picture for our listeners here.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so like I said, I'm from Winnipeg. I'm 38 years old. Grew up in Winnipeg from birth. But my story kind of starts as I grew up in a domestic violence household in the north end of Winnipeg, to a grandmother and grandfather. My grandfather was a heavy, I'm sure, real alcoholic. My grandmother was just a hard housewife. Loving grandmother who tried to shield me from my grandfather's wrath. I remember that very vividly as a child. For the first 10, 12 years, was bad domestic violence and beatings for myself. So yeah, like I was saying, my grandfather was a very bad alcoholic, abuser. I grew up with that for about 10, 15 years. I also grew up with gang members in Winnipeg. I grew up with a gang called Indian Posse. As Bill stated, it is a bad area. It was poverty, it was domestic violence, it was gangs, it was crime. It took me in when my household was so scary and I didn't feel wanted. I felt discriminated against in my household as I'm a different ethnic race than what was in my household. So the streets were a good place for me as a child. My house was too chaotic that the streets took me in. Those gang members taught me how to live in a sense, I guess, because I didn't get taught it in my household.
I'd like to ask you something. You know, you're mentioning right off the bat that you were raised by your grandparents. Where were your mom and dad?
My mom and dad, my mom passed when I was 2.5 years old. Looking for my father, actually. He was an alcoholic womanizer. They were only together for a short time before my birth and not long after. But she passed from a motorcycle accident trying to look for my father one night in 1986, I would say. My father was never really around. He was a organized crime kind of drug smuggler, in jail most of my younger years.
Okay, so being raised with your grandmother and grandfather, your grandmother trying to protect you, I guess, in the best way that she could, right? And I'm sure she's trying to protect herself in the same right. What was your grandmother like?
My grandmother was a very kind, quiet, loving, overtly pleasing our family. She went above and beyond to make sure all the kids and grandkids and my grandfather were all right, and there was never any problems. So she was a very, very big people pleaser. That's where I got my people pleasing, and I think the root of my codependency comes from my grandmother and the way she protected me from the environment I was raised in and my grandfather.
And did you have any tight relations with your grandfather, or was he just so disconnected that you just tried to, you know, walk on eggshells and not interrupt his life?
Yeah, it was mostly walking on eggshells with him. He was a very violent, angry, vocal man when he drank, and he drank 6 out of 7 days of the week. So yeah, I walked on eggshells almost all of my life up until his passing a handful of years ago.
And who else lived with you guys?
We had a big family. My grandmother and grandfather had 7 children. 3 of them were raised with me. My Uncle Randy, my Uncle Craig, and my Auntie Lisa. They're like my brothers and sisters growing up. They're 5-10 years older than me. But I also had a lot of little cousins from my auntie and my uncles that came to my house. So they were kind of raised in my house too. About, I'd say 5 to 8 little cousins were also raised in my household.
So you'd mentioned the people-pleasing defect, right? And that probably riddled your whole life. As you mentioned, you kind of, you know, connected in a way with the gang lifestyle and the members who embraced you and took you in. And I'm sure that people-pleasing defect at a young age served the gang life well, at least for them, but probably didn't really help you a lot. What was it like growing up in that gang type of family environment?
Well, what it was like back then, I guess, the little bit I remember, what was it like? Back then it was normal. It was what I had to do to fit in. But as I look back now and my mind is more clear and I'm woke to myself a little bit today, it was scary. I was scared. I lived in fear. I wanted to please them. I did whatever that people said to not ruffle any feathers. I walked on eggshells. My grandfather taught me that from a young age, and that just spilled into my life, into the gang life.
And then kind of walking through that gang life. Maybe we don't get into too much detail on that, but how old were you when you finally got out of that lifestyle, and kind of where did it take you?
I got into that lifestyle probably about 8 or 9 years old. My first elementary school was full of Indian posse members and wannabes, I guess, and lost souls, children. I would have to leave it up to when I came into recovery. So 2016, 2017 is kind of when I got out of that lifestyle.
Holy shit, bro. So from a young kid, your whole teenage and adult life, you're saying that you were involved in that type of lifestyle?
Yes, I had to be. It's how I survived. It's what kept me safe in those years.
And then when you got into recovery, was Calgary where you got into recovery?
Yes, it is. Yeah, I have an amazing friend who's an RN out here. When I was in jail in 2016, she wrote me a letter and stated how beautiful Calgary is and how she changed her life and all these opportunities. So I moved to Calgary, and that's when I found recovery and God found me.
What year about was that?
That was 2016 when I moved to Calgary.
Okay, so 2016 and all those years prior to that, you're entrenched in this lifestyle. So what was it like when you got here, and how did you find like recovery? Like, you know, you moved here probably to get away and have a new start in life, I'm assuming. And did you come here to like get sober, or did that just kind of happen organically?
No, when I got that letter from my friend in 2016, I was so lost and afraid and losing all my family. I had nothing. I was so stuck in bondage that, yeah, it was to get clean. It was to get rid of this substance, because that's what I thought it was in the beginning. I thought all my only problem was drugs and alcohol. And if I move to Calgary, I can fix that.
So how were you introduced to recovery? Who took you, or did you look it up yourself, or did you use drugs and alcohol when you first got here? Like, how was it?
Yeah, well, let me start from 2016. I got out of a federal penitentiary for armed robbery for my drug of choice. I used to do crimes to fulfill my drug of choice. But I moved here 2016, and no, it wasn't all recovery and rainbows. The first year and a half, 2 years was homelessness, stuck on the street, lying, stealing, manipulating, homeless shelters, violence, sleeping outside, lying to my family, losing all my family because I was on this new substance called methamphetamines. And that scared my family like no other substance did. That really pushed us apart there in 2017, 18. And yeah, that was my couple years. First moving to Calgary was homelessness and addiction.
And who introduced you to the rooms or recovery, or how did you take your first steps in a different direction?
How I took my first steps was from an amazing man named Dean H. He's a part of this church that where God first brought me to find recovery. An amazing church called Eastside City. I want to give them a shout out and send them some love and let them know that I respect them and appreciate them for what they did and showing me that love in those first few months of recovery and being lost.
Okay, so this D&H guy, what did he do? Did he bring you to a meeting, or what did he do?
Yeah, we actually started a program. I started a program called Celebrate Recovery at my church first. It's a 12-step program, an 8-step program, actually, I think, that just deals with some inner stuff and some fluff stuff. But that was enough to get me going. Shortly after that program, Dean brought me to our Mother Fellowship. And that's how I was introduced to the rooms.
And did you take right away? Like, so you come to the meetings, you start meeting some people, you start identifying with other people, their stories, you know, explaining many things for which you could not otherwise account. And, you know, how did this journey like go? Did you relapse? Did you, you know, take to it in one shot? Were you hearing the message that you actually understand today? Or, you know, spend whatever amount of time you need to kind of walk us through that whole beginning piece of, you know, what happened.
Yeah, so that's the beginning of my recovery. Starts in detox, starts in that program at church. My sponsor, Dean, takes me to a detox. I get into a treatment center. And that's where my real recovery journey started. At this treatment center, it's a recovery step program, treatment center based. And they brought me to the rooms of recovery. I started learning about myself early on. I stayed open and willing from the beginning. Bill asked a question, and it was if I had any hiccups along the line or how that went. And right from the beginning of recovery and detox, I really stayed open, willing to do whatever I had to get away from that fucking insanity that I was living and that I was putting my family through. I knew I had to change my behaviors and my ideals. That I just didn't have the tools to do that at that time. But as I stayed around and I did my first set of steps, I was so relieved. Like these bondages that kept me stressed out and ruminating and depression and shame, and these things that I did were finally being taken away from me. I was being able to communicate how I feel and tell people how angry I was and all these things that I avoided all my life or that I just never knew. So that first year recovery, the first set of steps was an amazing process. I don't like to boast about this, but my first set of steps were easy. I was there, open, willing. I bust whenever my sponsor said. I did all the suggestions, and that was important to me because I don't know if I would have stayed around if I didn't give it that much in that first year, that first set of steps. So that was an amazing process. That first set of steps started showing me why I was the way I was, why I treated my family the way I did, why that step one showed me, why do I want to use, or the biggest question of my life was, why do I continue using when all I want to do is be around my family and my little cousins and love them? And step one showed me that. And since then, I never looked back.
Dude, that's amazing. And you nail a few really good points, right? I think the points that I'd like to highlight here is that first set of steps really starts changing your perspective. It starts showing you like little things, gives you some confidence in the ability to try to be honest and try to be vulnerable. And, you know, most alcoholics and addicts, and maybe a lot of just people in general, we don't really know how to be in a real relationship, right, with another human being. You know, there's a line in the 12 and 12 where Bill W. writes, the primary fact that we fail to recognize is our total inability to form a true partnership with any other human being. And when I read that, it was a few years after I'd done my first set of steps. And I was like, that is so true. Because I remember when I did my first set of steps, I realized that I'd never actually been in a relationship with anybody, like a giving and taking, two people sharing and giving and taking and working with love. I'd never been in anything like that. I was always a taker, it was always a transaction, it was always based in fear. And you know, this program has taught me how to be in a real relationship with others and with myself, right? Another thing that you point out here is the relationship with your sponsor, right? Building that trust and building vulnerability and being able to break through those little veils of fear and give up that edge, right? You know, growing up in Winnipeg, I'm sure that way of life was like, you had to like hold the edge, man. You couldn't just be giving up the edge because you might need that edge, right? And to slowly relinquish that weapon to your sponsor is a beautiful, beautiful process. And I can relate, bro, because I went through the exact same thing. Also very violent, and you know, didn't grow up in a totally violent household, but I became pretty violent for most of my life. By the sounds of it, you did too. We didn't get into a lot of those details, right? But you don't spend federal time for nothing, right? You know, armed robbery, you know, it's not the gentlest of crimes. So you kind of work through that first set of steps, and you know, you get that first year and you're entirely willing to do whatever it takes, and you created some momentum, and you got to see some of the gifts of recovery. So I'm assuming that you maybe didn't stay sober. So how did it work? Did you relapse again? And then how long were you out, and how did you come back again?
Yeah, great question, Bill. So like I said, I did that first set of steps. I practiced, I was there, I bussed, I phoned, I did the work to the best of my ability that first year. Then COVID hits. I'm about 15, 18 months sober, active recovery, because I like to say sobriety ain't shit if I don't have recovery. And then COVID hits. I got a lot of service positions. I'm doing this new thing called Zoom and computers. I am technically not good at those kind of things. I'm starting to resent my coworker, my service members. I'm starting to resent Zoom. I'm starting to resent recovery in general because of my own sickness, this darkness, this staying home, this extra money from CERB, that time, it made me, I felt very weak. I stopped praying every morning. I stopped praying when I have a problem. I stopped going to meetings. I stopped reaching out to my sponsor and letting them know what was going on inside my head. That happened in maybe a month or two of resenting and not doing and not praying. I was high. I got high. I started with some mushrooms, ended with some crack. That lasted about 10, 15 hours, that relapse. I shook that shit off immediately the next day and started a new set of steps with my sponsor.
And you stayed sober up to this point since then?
Yes, I have.
So how long ago was that?
That was July 9th, a year ago, 2 years ago almost.
Wow. So, you know, I guess the main point is this is very common. What happened to you is very common, right? A lot of people dig in and they start doing things differently, and things go really well for a while, you know, and there's some lines that are very important in our literature that say all went well for a time. And they always do go well for a time, but if we don't keep up on this spiritual program of action and following the disciplines and doing the things that you said you quit doing, right? You couldn't go to meetings, and you probably got a lot of value out of those human connections, and you know, you kind of started pulling away, and I'm assuming that self had bled back into your life and some discontentment, and now you got to stay home and do these computer meetings, which, you know, a lot of people really, really despised at the start of COVID, me included. Although I started that online meeting, which is still going today, you know, I really resented the fact that I had to do this on Zoom. You know, you pulled away from your sponsor, you weren't talking to your sponsor, and there's some fundamental things in recovery that are really non-negotiables, right? And for anybody new that's listening to Shayne's story here, I hope that you heard a few of those things that were mentioned. I'm going to say a few of those things are, you know, meetings. Meetings are detrimentally important. So there's some things that are detrimentally important as we move through our recovery programs. And, you know, meetings are super important, especially in the first couple years, right? You know, you get to hear different perspectives and take, and you get to hear what this illness will do to you if you don't work the whole program. Some other things that are really important are reaching out, right? Talking to your sponsor, talking to your God-centered pillars, not just about the feeling of using, but we're driven by using by the goings on of life. So we need to talk about the goings on within our lives in an honest and vulnerable way, so that we're able to get the guidance and help from the people that really are trying to help us, right? And some other things are, working the steps, working the steps until the steps work us. The inventory processes, the prayers, the learning how to meditate, these things are all detrimentally important to long-term recovery success. So, Shayne is into, we're going to get into his second round of steps here with his new sponsor or whoever that is. So Shayne, can you maybe guide us into, you relapse, you come back, and you slipped once. Like the really most people who slip for one day, bro, they come back often, but they never stay sober for the time that they think they're going to stay sober. Usually once you set off that phenomenon of craving, you have kicked off that obsession again. And usually you're out for another 3, 6, 8 months, year, 2 years. So your story of slipping once, coming back and staying sober, that is very unheard of. And that just goes to show like your willingness to really want to change your life. So as you come back from this relapse, kind of tell us how it goes.
Yeah, so I have this relapse that 10-15 hour evening, and I come back the next day. I was so scared and lost that I laid there for hours trying to lie into how I can get away from this, how I don't have to lose my sponsees, how I can bullshit my sponsor. I came to the conclusion that I can't. God shown me in this journey that lying and being dishonest and holding things back from the people who really care about my life more than they do my feelings is something that I just can't do today. So I come back and I do this second set of steps. The second set of steps is a little more deeper. I'm understanding it. I'm seeing these steps a little more. They're coming more into my life and my behaviors, and I'm growing like I never grew before. That first set of steps was just the opening to fucking find out this crazy man named Shayne and to really just keep seeking him. That second set of steps, I just learned more about him. I learned more about the behaviors. I learned more about creating values and what are my real ideals in life. I learned a lot more about people pleasing as my relapse was because of my people pleasing defect.
You'd mentioned something earlier about really understanding why is it when I want to treat my family and be part of my family, why can't I stay sober? And going through the first set of steps, I'm sure that you got a really good understanding of what step one was. And having that relapse, I'm sure you got the real understanding of what step one is and the powerlessness and the utter inability to leave it alone, no matter how great the necessity or the wish. And through that knowledge and understanding and deep level concession of, you're fucked if you drink. And then you really understand the need for a relationship with God, right? And not just the theory of God, something that I pray to here and there when I'm in trouble, like a real building of a relationship, right? And then what I really like about where you're going with your story is in your second set of steps, you're really focusing on the character, really focusing on getting into what makes Shayne tick. And these are actually the reasons why we fucking drink, right? In that one chapter, in the doctor's opinion, there's a solution that talks about the ideals, emotions, and attitudes, right? That are the guiding forces of the lives of these men. You got into those guiding forces, the ideas, the emotions, and the attitudes, what's driving you, what makes Shayne tick. And you started seeing a lot of truths, which is so important, because if we don't look at these areas within ourselves, we will pick up a drink again, right? So as you're kind of learning about what and who you are, what were some of the main catalysts that pushed your recovery? What kept you going and what inspired you? And
the hurt was the motivation. Every time I got into another relationship and I fucking felt the hurt of defects coming out and my needs not being met, that was my catalyst. The pain kept making me come back and making me not quit. Yeah, back in the day, the pain and the fucking confusion and frustration would always set me out. Today, this pain is a gift to me. I love going through these things. I don't love going through these things in the moment, but very shortly after, I love those painful situations, those ignorances, those behaviors that come out from me. Because today I can see. Today I don't have to live with them. So my biggest catalyst is my failures, is my challenges.
Okay. You know, you just brought to light a line in the step 10 and the 12 and 12 where it talks about the pains of drinking had to come before sobriety, which you described very well, and inner turmoil before serenity. As you've gone along your journey, it sounds like you got to the point where you knew that the drugs and alcohol weren't the issue, and it was these inner behaviors. And as you're working your way through your own life and your recovery, you're engaging in, is it mostly intimate relationships or friendships and intimate relationships?
This couple of years in recovery, it's been mostly intimate relationships.
Okay, so you run into these problems with, you know, women, I guess, and, you know, as much as you might want this relationship, there's still an aspect of fighting everyone and everything. But knowing at this point that the drugs and alcohol ain't gonna help you, and that is a mental defense, but even more so than just a mental defense, because we can't stay sober on the mental defense. You're still seeking and trying to bring more God into your life and learn more about yourself. And in the book, it talks about when we drew near to him, he disclosed himself to us. So you're drawing more near to God by going through the pain and kind of extracting and digging up and excavating more hurt and pain and why you do things. And then as you're describing, the light that comes out of that pain is always, it's always something that you've learned about yourself, and you've discarded some more pieces of yourself. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what it is. Those pains, those trials, those things I'm going through, they get to show me the scariest fucking part of myself that I ran from, that I used dope and liquor for. That's what I used, was to hide these things, to not deal with these things. So today, when these things come out in my relationships, my friendships, my work, yes, they may be confusing and hard to handle in the moment, but God has given me this gift where I can see them as a miracle today. And I'm just so grateful that these things in myself are illuminated, because if it wasn't for this process, these steps, God, my pillars, my seeking, I'd be blind and lost still.
In some of those earlier intimate relationships that you were getting in early recovery, what were some of the challenges that you found within yourself that you had to work through? Defects of character, or, you know, acceptance of other people, or, you know, forgiveness?
Well, I went against the grain right from the beginning. It suggested to me when I first came in that I stay out of relationships for a year. So my first mistake was I'm a sick fucking guy. I'm lonely. I want to be fulfilled. I got 8 months sobriety. I want to be fulfilled emotionally, and I want to be fed. I want somebody to love me because I don't love myself. So yeah, every defect came out. My codependency, my controlling, my manipulating. I lied a little bit in every relationship. Yeah.
So now here you are coming up on 2 years this July. You know, I know that you're in another relationship and it seems to be going very well, right? You know, you and I talk, and, you know, of course, every relationship has its challenges. What's different about this relationship in your growth and in your recovery that's different than the others?
What's different in this relationship? My first 3 relationships in recovery were short-lived, and they only had those relationships only had one person really seeking, one person really healing at a level, at a different level than the other. We were fresh in recovery. We were just all sick in those first 3 relations. But this relationship, why it's so different, because of those experiences I went through. I've got to go through those hurts. I've got to hurt those women in my defects ways. I got to take advantage of them again. And I got to see these actions like I never seen them. My whole life, I was blind to my actions. I didn't know how I was treating my girlfriends, how I was using them, how I was controlling them, how this disease was manifesting in my life. I never seen it. So today, my eyes are more open because of those past trials. I also have a woman who's got some years around recovery, who's as open as I am to these defects that come out in each other and ourselves, who's willing to face these things, who's actively working with her sponsor as I am. So that's what makes this relationship a lot differently. I've done a few more things to heal, like some Codependence Anonymous steps, which has made this relationship totally different than the last. I'm working more with my sponsor and being honest with him about things that are going on with my relationship. And I'm just here trying to love her the best I can. And I do that by loving myself.
Dude, that's pretty amazing, eh? And I know we've had a few chats, and you know, the vulnerability aspect of building these intimate relationships is massive. You had mentioned that you lied to whatever degree in some of your past relationships, and you know, I'm just gonna say it's probably safe to say that you're not lying, and you're not trying to hold things to yourself just to avoid conflict. And maybe there's a period of discernment, but we know once we've cleared out that channel, there's that feeling within us where if we don't talk about what it is, that feeling eats us up, and we're just suppressing our truth, right? So sometimes it takes a couple of conversations with a sponsor, a pillar. Sometimes it takes a couple days or a week or something to, you know, find the right way to word it, because, you know, we're still in some fear, and we're still, you know, some of these old patterns can kind of hook us back in, but at least we're able to feel what we need to feel and then take the actions with our higher power by our side to like go into this. And usually I find from my experiences with this vulnerability in intimate relationships, it actually bonds and expands the relationship even more, hey?
Oh yes, yeah, to open up and to tell somebody what I'm going through is my only option today. If I don't do that, I will get higher drunk. That's just a fact today.
And you know, one of my mentors, Jordan Peterson, he talks about it's more risky to not say something when something needs to be said, right? And you know, even in these intimate relationships, it's in a sense, it's kind of like what you said earlier. Like we still got to care more about our partner's lives than their feelings sometimes. We got to care more about our own lives than our own feelings sometimes. And we got to step out of these comfort zones and tell the truth, right? And the cool thing about recovery, you know, truth is very subjective. Truth is based on whatever ideologies you have and belief systems and fears that run your life at the time of what you think is true. But with an open mind, right? With an open mind and an open heart, truth becomes truth through love. And truth becomes the guiding force of what is inside of you based in love that you can't go against anymore. And there's a fine line between trauma truth and love truth, or trauma intuition or real intuition based in love for oneself. There's a big difference there. And the trauma intuition or truth is based in fear, And real truth and love from within is based in love. And once you kind of get that boundary setter of working with the truth and the rigorous honesty from within oneself, then we don't need to set all those other boundaries out of all the insecurities of us anymore, right? Because we're not afraid. With this creator with us, we can go and have a chat with anybody about anything, and we leave the results up to God. And the cool thing with us is we can go to bed at night, lay our head on the pillow, and know that we just did the best we could, right? So I'd like to ask you, what are the kinds of things that you do, for your recovery today? What are the kind of things that keep you going and motivated and sober, essentially, and building your relationship with your creator?
Well, that's a simple answer, Bill. It's the triangle that I try to live by. It's trust God. I just try to trust God in everything I do. I have faith in him. I know I felt him pull me out of so many fucked up situations and behaviors of mine and darknesses, and taking so much trauma and guiding me through this recovery journey. So today I really have to remember that and trust God. I trust him by praying to him, by talking to him, by doing his work. The other one is help others. I have to help others today. If I don't give away these behaviors, these things I'm shedding, these tools I'm getting, these knowings, then I will get higher drunk again. That's just a fact. And it's cleaning my house. I have to continue to do the inventory. I have to continue to look at my days, to look where I've been selfish, where I lied, where I fucking just was ignorant to my girlfriend, where I didn't think of her daughter when she just asked me a question and I said, no, hold on a second, I'm on my phone. I have to clean my house today. And cleaning my house allows me to see all those things where I'm falling short in my day, where I make a mistake, where I hurt feelings. That's pretty much how I do it, Bill. I trust God, I clean my house, and I help others. There's a lot more to it, but that's pretty much the core of it. And I pray hundreds of times a day. Anytime I have anything going on in my head negative, I'm rude, I feel a thing, somebody cuts me off, I'm saying a prayer for that other person. I'm saying a prayer to ask God to show me how to be in that moment.
Dude, I love that you said you pray 100 times a day or more, because dude, in the book, it talks about growing in conscious companionship with our creator. And the most profound result of all was our change in our attitude towards God. It's when God is the attitude, right? It's when love is the attitude. And when, your partner's daughter says something to you and you just kind of say no, and then you realize, I'm on my phone. I'm not even present with this young person. Then you give your head a shake and you do that inventory in that moment. And then it's like, put the phone down and engage, right? And try something different, right? You had mentioned something else that's really cool. You had mentioned the triangle, right? Help others, clean house, trust God, in whatever order. But I believe the order is important, because I don't believe you can trust God if you haven't cleaned house. It's a fucking joke. It's a theory. It's an ideology. And it's the ego attachment to the ideal that you're trusting God. Through the precepts and the disciplines within this program and the directions, we will trust God. And a lot of these directions and precepts and spiritual disciplines are based in the inventory. They're based in taking the inventory, going to prayer, listening in the meditation, and trying to build that character, right, in the spiritual values. Through that cleaning house, we can have a way better chance at trusting God. And then the other one you had mentioned was help others, right? And when we're helping others, it's the altruistic part of the program. But altruism doesn't mean that you just go help somebody, but your motives are all about self, right? Although that's how it has to start, right? Just because it's an altruistic act does not mean it's altruism. But in this journey of recovery, myself included, when I first started doing service work, I did it with pure selfish motives because I didn't want to die. I wanted to stay sober, but I reluctantly had to go and be of service, whether that be sponsorship, chairing meetings, doing this and that. But when you look at the definition of altruism, unselfishly devoting oneself to the welfare, happiness, and well-being of others, it wasn't that definition. It was actually very selfishly done, but down the road, as you do many acts consecutively of altruism, it changes into, it just makes you feel good, right? And then it's still a selfish motive, because when you feel like shit, you're always looking to feel better. So it's like, okay, who can I go help? So the motive is still selfish in many respects, which is better than it was. So it's a process, right? A continuous, persistent, consistent commitment to keep doing acts of altruism. And I think down the road, as we grow in understanding and effectiveness, we can get to the place of altruism, where we can unselfishly devote our time and our welfare for other people's welfare and well-being without any due reward for validation or anything. We just do it out of the goodness of our hearts, right? And is that all the time? No. It's, it comes and goes. It mostly is there for us, but every now and then, right, we get pretty selfish and we want things our own way, and it's not always like that. But I think you'd mentioned something earlier again, it's the best attitude you can have as you go on this journey, right? And so that's really cool. You brought up so many good points here, bro. I just want to finish a couple things off here with did you ever see the program where it was not clicking with you, where you weren't hearing the message that you hear now? Do you think, and if so, was it the actual environment of the program? Was it just people's opinions, or was it you? And I know that you're working like a solid program based out of the literature, and it's a higher level program. And why I ask this is because I know a lot of people are like, I never heard what you're talking about in the program before. And now I hear this from you and from other people like you. So I guess my take is that the program is very watered down in many parts of the world. And did you ever experience that?
Well, yeah, an amazing quote in the big book. You will meet some of us on this broad highway to the fellowship of the spirits, something along that lines. And yeah, I've seen a lot of places I've been in recovery watered down, maybe not watered down, but we are very sick people, and it's so hard for us to fucking get it and really. And I don't want to say we, actually, sorry. I'm a very sick person. And yes, the rooms are very watered down. The messages in a lot of the rooms I've been in are not right out of the big book. They're those steps off the wall. They're not dug into. They're not practically applied like I need it. I found a couple meetings that suit my type of recovery, the language I speak, the feelings, the things I'm doing to recover, and that's good enough for me today. But yeah, recovery is hard for us. These rooms are clouded with a bunch of bullshit and a bunch of opinions and judgment, and this is how you recover. I know that's just not how it is for me. I know how I recover. I don't know how you best should recover. So yeah, judgments and opinions are fucking rampant in the rooms.
10-4, and we won't get too much into that because I honestly could spend hours talking about that subject. I believe that through the processes and the dictates and the directions within the big book, there's great success. And when you think about this, right? Think about this. 15 to 20% of our society is being taken out by drugs and alcohol. And worldwide, North America wide, the recovery rate of recovering addicts and alcoholics is less than 2%. And when you do the math on that, over time, we're in trouble, right? And I've seen great success from the big book as it is laid out in the precepts and the direct application of what the directions are. You know, the big book says 50% get sober at once. I've seen that. I've seen that exact stat. Actually, I've seen it at about 60%. But generally in alcoholics, or generally in the program, you know, 5 people out of 100 make it a year, 2.5 make it to 5 years. It's not by mistake, right? It's not by mistake. So if you're out there and you really want to recover from a substance, that's great. Come and do the steps and, you know, give yourself a chance. And then, like Shayne's story has described, dig within yourself and look at what the real problem is, right? It's within ourselves. And, you know, the fear of using might motivate you to move forward in this program. The fear of using or the old lifestyle and hurting people. But eventually it's the God dope, it's the creator dope that keeps you and wants to pull you along, and you just want more of that, right? For every bit of darkness, there's always light, and that is motivating, and it's such a beautiful journey. So I'd like to ask you to, you know, for anyone that's new or been in and out before, what's your message to somebody that hasn't really seen and tried what it really is and what we do around here?
Well, if you're dying and you're that low bottom junkie alcoholic like I was, I don't know what will work for you, but I know what worked for me. It was detox, it was treatment, it was clearing my mind so I can allow God to create a new me. My life was so fucked up in the beginning and so clouded from all those years of trauma that I just hope you're going to be as open and willing and not wanting to die as much as I was, because I don't want to see you die, and I just want to spread this God dope as much as I can, man. And if you're new, coming back, or struggling, stay around this. This is the only program, the only recovery, the only thing that worked for me was practically applying this big book that I feel is like my Bible.
Shayne, great stuff, my friend. I really, really am indebted and grateful for you to coming and sharing your personal experience with, you know, the beginning parts of your life and where you're at today. And I know today, after this, you're going to enjoy family, right? The very thing that you used to hurt and demolish and destroy, now it's becoming like the biggest part of your life, right? And these are the gifts, right? But we know we don't let up on this stuff. We got to keep on moving our feet and digging in and doing what we got to do. So Shayne, I just want to thank you for your message to people, the message that I get from you, and for your friendship and what you do for the community at large, buddy. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Bill, for having me, man. This was, I'm grateful for this opportunity. I love spreading this hope, faith, and courage to the people out here still suffering, because I'm suffering, and I need to do this to not suffer. So thank you very much, Bill. Nothing but love and good vibes and respect for all of us out here fighting. Prayers for the ones struggling. And stay shining, y'all.
Yo.
Thank you for tuning in to the UDRcast. We hope you have enjoyed this episode. The viewpoints and the opinions expressed today were solely of the individual sharing them. If you resonated with this episode, please follow us and share this link with anyone that may benefit from it. Please visit us at billward.life to see everything that we have going on. We can recover, one person, one family, one community at a time.